Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I am here today with Drew and with Holly from Juniper Farms. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this interview. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So usually what I do is I actually introduce everybody with their social media pages and how they can be found. And I'm going to let you have the honors of announcing your social media pages.
Okay, well, you can find us on Facebook at Juniperfarm's Life, Life, and Instagram at the Juniper Farms. And then we're also on YouTube. You can just go to youtube.com/juniperfarms.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about who you folks are, where you're from, where you were born, where you're living at now.
Yeah, so I am from the Austin area, and I grew up there. In about 2001, we moved down to the Coastal Bend area.
And then I'm from Northeast Texas, Texarkana, Texas. It's right on the border of Texas and Arkansas. And we moved down to Corpus Christi, Texas when I was 11. And we've been down in the area ever since.
Okay. And your actual, well, you don't have to give your town, but you're close to the ocean, right?
Right, yeah, we're right on the coast. We're about 20 minutes from Corpus Christi.
Okay, very good. And what is your roles outside of your homestead?
Well, I have a full-time job. I work for my dad. He has a company that takes care of cooling towers. We do chemical water treatment, make sure everything's running properly.
And I am a homeschool mom of 3, and so I'm home with the kiddos. And then on the side, I do flip furniture just for fun and for extra money. So.
Okay, great. So of course this video is about homesteading, as all of my videos are, but I want to get right into the meat and potatoes of this video. And you had shared on your YouTube video that you guys have come from a place of despair and grief due to a circumstance that has happened a couple of years ago. And I would like for you to share that with the audience, and not to exploit this situation in any way, but in the hopes that it will be a learning situation for other individuals.
Okay. So several years ago, we adopted a brother and a sister. And well, we did foster care first. We fostered them for about a year, and then we eventually adopted them. And a few years went by, and we realized that the oldest, it was a brother and a sister, and the oldest one was a boy, and that he was making bad choices at night that directly affected the safety of our other children. So CPS got involved, and eventually it was agreed that it would be safer for everyone if he no longer lived in our home.
And I'm sorry, but what is CPS, just for individuals that don't know?
Child Protective Services.
Okay.
And they're the ones that will, they bring you foster kids and take care of all of that. But and in the moment, that was devastating for us. Not only that we were dealing with, the side effects of what our other children went through, but then we also lost a child that we loved with all our hearts. So that's really where it all went down.
Again, I'm so sorry for that situation, and I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you and your family. How do you think that it affected the other children in the home?
Now they're doing great. It
was a process, though.
Yeah, our oldest daughter, she's our adopted daughter. She is just wonderful. She's maturing and growing, and we see God in her every day, and she's beautiful. And then our younger two, we have our biological daughter is older, and then our youngest child is a boy, biological, and they're best friends. I mean, they seem to be healing just fine.
And at first, I mean, there was obviously things that we had to deal with that came with the abuse that had happened and things to work through. And I think, you know, obviously there's still things that they do deal with. But overall, we feel like, I mean, that they are, I'm trying to think the best way to put it, that they are growing wonderfully, and that they don't seem to be struggling with it as much now. I mean, I guess just with grief in general, that's kind of what happens. Like it's not like it doesn't still hurt or it isn't still sad, but I think
Of
that
course.
they've grown through it for sure. So
Who are your supporters through all of this?
Well, obviously, God is our biggest supporter. And, you know, without him, there is no healing, you know. He is just a big part of our lives. And through this, we've grown closer to him. And you know, our relationship with God's really, really supported us a lot. And then we've got our extended family on both sides. They're constantly supporting us.
That's good. It's always and very important to have family and friends around to support you. How are the other children affected by spirituality, and how do you bring spirituality to the children when they're in the time of grief like this?
I think just trying to teach them that, you know, God is good and he loves us and he wants good things. And that's like been the big thing that we've been just trying to learn as a family, is that, you know, bad things happen and things don't always go as planned. And obviously we pray with our children constantly and just try to teach them that real life is things not always going the way you want them to go, and that we are going to face hard things and we are going to deal with things in life that are going to shake us up and knock us down. But I really feel like God's been just teaching us that life, and even in our farming and everything, like there's seasons and everything. And it's kind of been cool because we can use examples of farm life that seem more real life to them. And like, you know, when a chick hatches, it doesn't just stop. Like life isn't done at that point. Like there's still so much more growth and so much more things that come from it. And, you know, when an animal that we love dies, there's still other things that are happening and growing and moving, and life still goes forward, even though a phase or a season is done, that there's still so much more growth and so much more life to come. And we just really feel like, you know, that's something we're trying to teach our kids, and even just learn ourselves, is that God's not done with us and he's not done with our story. And even though things were, you know, it was a hard season and still getting through it, but God's bringing new life through it, just like he does with the farm and with farmsteading and homesteading. And we're not gardening yet, but, you know, even in gardening, I can see how there's always new life and there's always room for growth.
Gosh, Holly, that was very well said. You want to share why you named your channel or your farm Juniper Farms?
Yes. So our farm kind of started with a random rabbit that wandered up at my father-in-law's house. My husband, it kind of just came up to him, or let him get it easily. He picked it up, took it home, and we fell in love with this rabbit. And he had talked about having more, and I was like, no. But then the more we messed with the rabbits and saw how much the kids loved it, we decided to I think we got one more, and then we got 4 chickens. Anyway, so then we kind of started seeing like, man, we could do this farm thing. Like this sounds really fun, and the kids really enjoyed it. And we started just kind of like talking about our future and if we were to have a farm. And we were talking about how we really would want like a name that just spoke life. Sorry, that would just speak life over our situation. And so we kind of talked about it for a long time, never really came up with anything. I prayed for a few weeks, and one day I was feeding the rabbits, and we had a rabbit that wasn't named or something. I don't remember what happened, but the name Juniper just popped in my head, like out of nowhere. And I was like, well, that was random. That's a cool name. And then I was like, oh, what a cute name for a rabbit. We didn't end up even naming the rabbit that, but that name just kept playing in my head, Juniper, Juniper. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to look into this, because I've heard of a juniper tree, but never really like thought about it. So anyways, I went inside and I Googled a juniper tree. Well, all this stuff started popping up about how junipers grow in these harsh climates, and how they have these strong root systems that just hold on to whatever foundation they're in, whether no matter what the weather is around them. They grow in cold climates and dry climates and whatever. And I was like, man, how cool is that? Like, I'd been praying and it just like hit me out of nowhere. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to look and see if there's any verses that talk about juniper. Well, so I looked it up, and sure enough, there was our main verse, Isaiah 55:13, that instead of a thorn bush, a juniper will grow. And anyway, so that's when we're like, well, this is the name, because this totally speaks life over our situation. And that's just kind of where our hearts are. Like, we want our farm and our life to represent this juniper tree, and that we are rooted in a good foundation, and no matter what happens around us, that we are rooted strongly and firmly in who God is and who he says we are. So
Very nice, very touching. I love that. If you can say one thing that you learned from this experience, what would that be?
Can I do this one?
Really, I mean, the most important thing that we've learned is that God is good even when things don't go the way we thought they would, or when our life gets turned upside down. Like, he is making all things new constantly for us. And I mean, I've always known that, I guess, but never experienced it until the last few years. And it's amazing.
Sometimes it takes tragic things to happen in our lives to see clear. Okay, so I'm sorry for your loss, and I wish you and your farm and your family continuous growth. So let's move on with another note, and go ahead and describe for our audience what your little homestead looks like.
Let me do it.
Yeah.
Well, so we live on 2.5 acres. We've got a small pond towards the back of the property. That down here in South Texas, we go through phases of drought. So the pond will be full, and then it'll be almost empty, and we'll be worrying what we're going to do with all the fish, because we've got quite a bit of fish in there. We've got, in our videos, I'm sure people have seen the big play area for the kids. And we've got turkeys running around, lots of chickens, and then the rabbits.
Are those rabbits, are they meat rabbits?
They are not. We breed our rabbits for pets. My goal is I want to start breeding for 4-H.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get my kids in 4-H. We're not even in 4-H yet, but start breeding for that. And then I am going to get meat rabbits. That's another thing we're going to get into, but I didn't grow up butchering things, so it's going to be a learning process. I've been putting it off.
Well, it'll be a process. And you said, for your dream for your homestead is to move to a bigger parcel of land. What would that look like? I think you said 5 acres, or what are your dreams besides getting the kids into 4-H? What are your dreams for a future homestead?
Yeah, we would love to expand to starting out at 5 acres and learn, I guess, really start from the ground up and learn what we can do, what we're capable of, and how to do things right before we go real big.
And let me tell you, that is so smart. I mean, the biggest advice I can give, and so many long-term homesteaders, is start small, do a lot of research and education, educate yourself, and make lots of plans. Because per season that goes by, if you're not prepared one season, your whole next season could be messed up. So yeah, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. But one thing I always say to people is that this is definitely a journey. It's not a race. And you have to enjoy it every step that you take. Because if you don't, when the times are hard, it can get very frustrating. And there's a lot of times where you just want to just give up and say, this isn't worth it. It's too much work. It's not paying back. So you're very smart by wanting to start small and just learning as you go.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So one of the big things I wanted to talk to you about is homeschooling. And I know you homeschool the kids, and I really want you to give the audience an overview of homeschooling. And I know a lot of homesteaders do homeschool and a lot don't. I mean, maybe some do, some don't. I don't know. I don't have little kids anymore. But to me, if I would be approached and someone said to me, how do you go about starting homeschooling? I wouldn't have a clue. So I really would like for you to explain, give the ins and outs about homeschooling. How do you start? How do you know what kind of curriculum you're looking for? What are the rules and regulations about with school districts, and just kind of give us a brief overview of homeschooling.
Okay. Yeah. So in our area, we didn't really. So whenever I had pulled the kids out of school, I did have to prove a curriculum that we were going to be using so that people knew. Other than that, we're not accountable to the school system in any way for where I'm at. But the way I kind of just started was I researched a bunch of different curriculum. We know a lot of families that homeschool, so I asked around, and then kind of just decided to go with one, and we ended up changing a couple times, but just kind of seeing what fit for our family, because all kids are different, and everybody's family dynamics work differently. And anyway, so we just kind of went with what worked best for our family at the time. And yeah, so I'm definitely not like a pro in the homeschooling. We still kind of learn it day by day as we go, but we really enjoy it though. So.
And then what about the socialization for the kids? And you made a comment to me before that I really liked about socialization of public school versus maybe the not so much socialization of homeschooling and the difference between those.
Yeah, so I think it's funny when people talk about, if your kids were in public school, they'd be socialized. And I don't know, not that all public school kids are not good, because I know and love plenty of them, but there's definitely your typical public school kid, I guess. And I just think of the attitudes and the things that come with that. And I don't know, I think I'm okay with my kids being socialized the way they are and not like your everyday American kid. but they do a lot with other kids. We're really involved in church. We have a couple things that go on throughout the week just with church alone. We have a small homeschool group that we get together that has about 8 to 10 kids that they do it's art and then STEM projects. So the science, technology, engineering, and math kind of all wrapped together. They do that a couple times a month. Sports, which right now we're waiting for sports to start up again, but they do that. And
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But we're very busy. We have stuff throughout the week all the time with just other people going on. So
that's really good. So what do you think the benefits are, homesteading versus being in a private or public school?
I really like that they get to have the one-on-one teaching. I think it kind of helps keep me accountable too, to how much, I'm trying to think the best way to word it, but it helps me be more intentional with the time that I'm investing in them. And I love the time that we get to spend together. Obviously there's days that I would like to have a break and not have to do it, because every mom likes to have a break, but I really enjoyed that they get to have the one-on-one time with me as a teacher, and then even with each other. They are so close and they get along really well. I mean, they have their moments where they bicker, but for the most part, they're each other's best friends and they just love each other. It's crazy to see the relationship with each other. And I think that then being homeschooled has helped with that. I'm sure their personalities have a part in that as well, but they just seem to be closer through it for sure.
Nice. Biggest challenges with homeschooling?
So I feel like we've gotten better in this, but it definitely has been the consistent challenge. And that is to just stay motivated and focused, to get up and get it done so we can get to our other activities that they want to do. They have grown a lot in that and being more focused, but it's probably the one challenge I could see. For a while, I really did stress out too about just making sure they get everything they need educationally. And for a while, I did worry about the socialization and are they getting what they need, and that aspect too. But we've really kind of filled in those gaps pretty well, I feel like. So,
Biggest successes?
I think honestly their relationships and our relationships, and maybe even with everything we've gone through, I'm sure that's played a big role in how close we've all just grown to each other. We've had to cling to each other a lot and learn what it means to cling to God, and they've learned that as well. And I think that's kind of just been what's allowed us to each grow so close to each other for sure.
I can imagine. Many years ago, homesteading wasn't always a thing. It almost wasn't cool, maybe 20 years ago, right? Then it became very trendy. And I like to say, well, I was a homesteader when it wasn't cool. And I always tell the story about how, I was 18 and I lived in a condominium in Denver, and I had a chicken and I almost got evicted. And somewhere in my life, I wasn't raised this way. A seed was planted, and I always had a desire to be a homesteader and live in the country life in open air and open space and be able to grow my own food and have animals. And I so love this lifestyle, and I know most homesteaders do. If someone was to say to you, are you proud to be a homesteader? Or are you proud of it, or is it something that you feel like you have to minimize because maybe it's not as trendy as it once used to be?
Well,
I'm super proud of it.
yeah, I'm definitely proud of it.
Yeah.
I really, it's never crossed, probably not hers either, but never crossed
Yeah.
my mind that whether it's trendy or not. I mean,
Yeah.
we started doing it before we even found
All the different YouTubes.
Yeah, like one day I started looking up how to hatch chicks and whatnot, and that's kind of where we found YouTube from. But we just enjoy it, and I want to do more.
Yeah, me too. I love it. So we're getting ready to wrap up, and I just want to say that I have truly, truly enjoyed your story. I'm sorry for what you've gone through. I wish you folks nothing but the best, and I hope that your children grow and are happy and healthy. One last thing I just want to say is, if you can sum up your experience with homesteading in one word, what would that be?
I would say, and it's really been the topic of most of our answers, I guess, but growth. You can't grow in anything without growing in your relationship with God first. And that's where your true fruit and harvest comes from. And then everything else will follow.
Very well said. Holly, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree. I think, I don't know, I feel like we've learned a lot in life, and then just kind of seeing how it really relates to homesteading and farming. And it's been really neat to see how all these life lessons kind of just tie into the farm life. It's been really neat to see how God's just, I don't know, I guess re-implanted things in us through the joy of getting to watch these animals grow and watch our kids enjoy them grow too. So
Very nice. Nice interview, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank
Really,
you.
thank you.
Could we say one more thing?
Of course.
We just wanted to put it out there that, you know, a lot of people, we're not the only ones that go through a loss of any kind. I mean, loss of a child or any loss. And it's hard to find people that you can relate to sometimes. And I know when we first went through it, we couldn't find the right guidance on how to move on through it. So we just wanted to say that if anybody needs prayer or needs to talk or has questions or whatnot, that you're more than welcome to message us through Facebook or Instagram, and we'd be happy to pray for you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, ma'am.
You guys have a nice evening.
you,
You
thank
too.
you for
Thank you.